Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christy Mora. I am the Associate Director here at Generis. Director of Marketing, sorry, at Generis. And I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
No one knows what their title is anymore these days, right?
I really don't. I have to check my email signature. So thank you again for being here for First Time Generosity. Before I get started, I'd love to introduce you to both of our hosts, and I'll give you a little bit of information about both Generis and Churchfield. So we'll start with Generis, which is very near and dear to my heart. Here at Generis, we know a little something about generosity. For about 30 years, we've helped churches fund the gap between their God-inspired vision and their resources. And we know that gap, that's where so much tension lives for church leaders. And we also know that generosity isn't always cultivated through these episodic moments of generosity. And sometimes we need those initiatives, but they're really no match for creating a culture of lasting generosity. So that is where we come in. We walk alongside leaders like all of you who are tuning in right now to develop the system and processes needed for generosity. We help create ministry alignment and help you steward the people God has entrusted you with. And I think that's why we're all here. They matter to us so much. And our team comes in and we help close that funding gap to help you create a sustainable culture of generosity that will help you fund your vision. And our friends at Churchfield, they share that exact same passion that we do to see the church win. And Churchfield, if you don't know who they are a professional development community focused on helping you strengthen the daily business of your church so you can focus on the work you were called to do. They provide practical tools and training that your team excuse me, I need water. Okay, so Churchfield provides the practical tools and training that your team can use year-round, and it's not about that one-time development opportunity, which we're all seeing that across the board. There's no magic bullet. It's about that continuous growth. So Churchfield subscription gives you access to a growing collection of resources to help your ministry thrive. You and your team can access digital courses, a robust resource library. I was just perusing through it last night. And coaching sessions that will help you lead through some of your most challenging issues and help you get back to your calling. I don't know all about you. That sounds pretty on point right now. And our hosts today are my fearless leader, Jim Shepard, who's CEO and principal at Generis, and my new friend, Michael Lukaszewski, who's the founder at Churchfield and has the coolest neon sign behind him. So
neon sign back there.
It is very cool. I kind of want one. So I'm going to go ahead and show us the results of this poll. So we asked, what is your outlook about total cash gifts and donations to your church or ministry, excluding one-time extraordinary gifts over the next 3 months? So we're looking at July to September. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share the results with you guys. So most of the people are feeling very optimistic, which is encouraging. And then I see a close second is uncertain, and a few of them don't know, but it's pretty telling. I'll let you guys take it over from here.
Very cool.
That's encouraging.
Cool. Very cool. Hey, Michael, it's so good to be here with you and do this today. You and I have been friends for a minute, a while actually. And we've never done anything like this together. So I'm glad that we talked about it and got ourselves together here today and talk about an idea and some strategies around that idea that I think the people who are here really benefit from.
Yeah, I'm excited about today. I think, we've talked around these things for so long. It's actually finally nice to have a topic and a appointment on the calendar to show up and try to help some people with some of these ideas.
Yeah. And I think it's clear that we're big fans of each other. You do some things that are different from us, and we do some things that overlap in the middle. But you and I both have a real passion for developing giving in the church. And
yeah.
I think that's going to show through today when they hear what we talk about here. So
yeah,
really excited about it.
It's an important topic. So I love, when we talk through, I know when we met and spent some time in your office, we were the only ones in there because no one was in there yet. This whole idea of this journey came up, and I think you've got such helpful stuff on this that'll really help people today.
Yeah. Let's talk for a few minutes on the why before we dive into the teaching piece on this. Let's just kind of develop a little bit of a backdrop of why you and I picked this topic and why we think this is something that can be so helpful for the people here today. You got a couple of thoughts on that, and then we can just kind of you and I can back and forth, and then we'll dive into the teaching points.
Yeah, I mean, when we started this conversation, we definitely had this idea of a journey, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
generosity is not a one-time act, and people give
yeah,
money into a church. That can be the beginning of a relationship, or it's because they have a relationship. Hopefully, it's not the end of the relationship, but that journey is really important. And we said that we felt like that there was kind of an underrepresented part of that journey, and that being like the new people to help kind of get started. And we talked about the idea that people can't grow in their generosity, or they can't grow in that discipleship journey related to stewardship until they start. So like, how do we get people that haven't started the journey to even start the journey? And then we just started going back and forth, and there were just such good ideas that I thought we should probably talk about this.
yeah, yeah. The frustration I think that a lot of givers have is that most churches, and this is not a criticism, it's really just an observation. Most churches, what they offer is the step of tithing or biblical giving, however they express that, and they don't offer anything other than that.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of these people, what they'd like to do is they'd like to get started at a place that represents a next step for them. And I think I used the analogy with you a couple of times. It's like the idea of giving somebody a gym membership and they've never been to a gym in their life. You're not going to take them in the back and, throw a couple of plates on there and tell them to, throw up 240,
Right.
5 or 6
Doesn't that
times.
really mean like fitness instructor?
Exactly, like the trainer. Don't introduce them to the trainer day one, because once they meet the trainer, they'll probably never come back. You want to give them a dumbbell that's more into keep them with their ability, 5, 10, 15 pounds, something like that. And that's what we're saying here is let's give these givers a place where they can get started that moves them up to a point where they would be robust, spiritual, biblical givers at some point in time. Some get there faster than others, but I think it really gets in the way of them even getting started when their first step is just this huge step up that they can't take. And they just rationalize, well, gosh, I can't do that. So I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, which is basically nothing.
Yeah.
And what it ends up with is it's the largest single group of donors in the church. It's
Yeah.
the group because they're non-donors.
It's crazy to think about that, and we'll talk about that and how to motivate that. But most people in most churches don't give anything.
Yeah.
And it's not
Yeah.
because they hate the church. I mean, they're attending, but they just haven't taken that first step. And so a lot of times we talk about next steps and bigger principles and all this kind of stuff. They haven't taken the first step yet, and they're
Right,
not
that's right.
anti-step, right? They just
That's right.
haven't. They just haven't been motivated, or we haven't motivated them, or whatever reason, which we'll talk about. We haven't helped them take that first step. And until somebody takes that first step, they can't take the next step.
Yeah, I think it's very telling. This is going back a little ways, but the same year that we had the Olympics here in Atlanta, we had the Billy Graham Crusade, and I volunteered to be a floor counselor. Went through the Billy Graham training and everything that they do, and so when you're on the floor and you're counseling with these people that made a first-time decision, interestingly, you do not give them a Bible. You give them the Book of John. You
That's
give them
good.
the Book of John. You want them to start that journey. And so their first step is read the Book of John for the next 30 days. And I think that's what we're talking about here is let's give them a step they can take relative to where they are in their spiritual journey, not just present, biblical giving, which is, proportional giving as Paul expressed it, or the tithe, or however you might express it in the local church. That's too big a step for many of
Yeah.
them. And the secondary and and I like your point, they don't hate the church, but here's the other piece too, Michael. For many of them, it's not a giving problem. They're giving it somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a giving to my church problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the church has to take responsibility for, wait, I might be a part of the problem here. How I present it, how I message it, I'm not showing impact. I'm not helping them understand what their giving does when they give here. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons. We'll talk about that in the teaching there. But, I think your point was people can't grow in their journey until they actually start their journey.
Yeah, and I love the fact too that that I think it's really true. People are generous. We tend to think people are selfish. They're not giving to the church. When you look at all the data, I mean, charitable giving has gone up, and it goes up almost every year. People are giving to charity. They're just giving to other charities and not the church. And so, and there's a lot of great causes to give to, but I think ultimately we're here talking to church leaders, and we're church people, and we believe the church is really important. And so we want to kind of help kind of motivate people to get started with giving to their local church.
Yeah. Hey, that sounds like a good place for us to dive into the teaching. Why don't you take it and get us started on point number 1 there?
Love it. So I think what we'll roll out today is this idea of 3 steps, right? How do you get people to give for the very first time? How do you get them started on this journey? They're at the church, they've maybe listening to services or watching online, but they haven't given yet. How do you do that? All right. So we're going to lay out 3 things. And the first thing is you got to figure out who's who. Right? You just have to figure out who's in what category, and we're just calling that segment your givers. Now, I know the word segment doesn't sound very spiritual, kind of sounds like something a business would do, but all we're talking about is creating categories. We're just trying to figure out who's who. And so when we said, hey, the largest percentage of people in most churches don't give anything, what is that actual percentage? Who is that actual group? And so churches, we have a lot of information about people. I mean, we have a database. We're probably using a database to manage communications, or people checking in kids, and we know where people live and all this kind of stuff, right? So we have all this data. We have a lot of financial data. I know one of the things you guys help people do is understand and interpret their financial data. And so what the first thing that we want to do is we're going to talk about how do we reach these new people or these new givers who haven't given yet. Well, let's create a box. Let's create a bucket, create a segment so that we can communicate to them, so that we can figure out who they are. All the people in the church are not the same. We do this. It's interesting. We do this in other areas, not just money. We do this with our curriculum. I mean, we send children into the children's ministry.
Yeah, we do.
Send students to student ministry, and adults go into the adult service largely because they're different, right? They learn at a different pace, and they're going to, navigate to different things. And so I think this is so wildly important. And you have all this information. It's just gathering it and looking at it and figuring out what it is. So the first thing you want to do is kind of create these segments or create these buckets of givers. And so I'd love for you to kind of talk through maybe what those should be. How do we do that? What that looks like? Because I think this is a kind of that data informed starting point that we should start from.
Yeah, that's so good, Michael. I mean, it's just somebody, I don't know if it's somebody on our team or somebody outside of our team, but somebody said it this way: if you try to speak to everyone, you actually reach no one.
Yeah.
That segments do matter, that there are languages, there are native languages, there's inflections, there's tone that they hear, and I'm speaking figuratively. So what I'd like to do is to introduce a framework. This wouldn't be the only way you could frame it, but it is the way that we would typically frame it here at Generis. And the important thing here to understand is that we're not so much putting people into these segments, we're just, assigning them a segment based on how they behave in the life of the church. I mean, we didn't put them there. They actually put themselves there.
Right.
So what we've created is this series of this pair of triangles to kind of illustrate our point here, that there are higher capacity people, there are leadership people, there are people who are congregational. All right, let's talk through what those segments are. The high capacity givers are people just for whatever the reason, they just have more financial resources than other people. There's a few of them. If you'll look here on the chart on the left-hand side, there's a few of them, relatively speaking. They tend to account for a much larger share of the money than their representation is. Right? So there's a few people, a lot of money. It's pretty easy to see who those people are. You've looked at enough church databases over the years. I have. And you look at them and it's like, okay, yeah, I get that. And it might not be the same. I'm going to say, let's just pick a couple of places at First Baptist Church of Tupelo, Mississippi, and Gateway Church in Dallas area. Their high capacity givers might be completely different, but both of them have them. You have people that are different than everybody else. So they tend to be business leaders. They tend to be successful. The language that you use with them has to be language that they're accustomed to. The second group tends to be the very highly engaged layer of your church, people who both give and serve. They're volunteering, they run your parking lot ministries, they run First Impressions, they're in your childcare ministries, they're small group leaders, all the things that it takes to make your church happen that are not staff functions. That's this group right here. And you can see they're a very, very solid core in the middle. And they tend to be very, very strong in terms of their representation in people and in terms of their giving. Now, here's what you and I are here to talk about today, Michael. most churches pay a fair amount of attention to those first two segments because they know, that's how you pay for church, so to speak. But they don't go down and deal with this last group of people, which people wise is the largest group, but tends to be a smaller financial component.
Mhm.
And what you and I are saying today is it's worth it to go down here and do this for two reasons. It's a great place for disciple making. It's a great place for unleashing untapped potential, financially speaking. And so there's a two-part win down there in terms of it. So this is the group we're talking about today, congregational givers. That's where most of your non and nominal givers tend to be. Non-givers mean people who give nothing. Nominal meaning they're basically just tipping the church every now and then, whatever dollar amount that might be. That's what we want to help you activate through this session.
And I think this is what's so helpful about these triangles to me, Jim, is that these people are connected to the church. I mean,
right.
They're in the database. They're there. I mean, their kids may be involved in a kids ministry. They may send a kid to summer camp. They're there. They're not against the church. They get benefits from the church. They probably enjoy the sermon. They're there. They're in the building. They're in the database. And so they've taken a step. They just haven't taken this generosity step yet. And so everybody that kind of moves into this deeper part of the triangle, they all start out at the bottom. And so this whole journey idea is if we can get more people to start, we have more opportunity to disciple them and kind of move them along the path.
Yeah. It's such a necessary conversation, and that's what you and I want to try to cross the line with today. You see this family, Jim and Nancy, they're out there. If they have 2 or 3 kids, you can see all the check-ins they've done. You can see that they're in small groups, so you know that they're active in the life of your church, but you move over to the contributions model inside of your church management system, and it says 0.
Mm-hmm.
And you're scratching your head and you're thinking, what's going on here? They obviously like the church, but they're not. They don't feel like they need to be financially invested, and that's the journey we're talking about here today.
So I think we have a little poll that we can put up too. But
yes, we do.
I don't want everybody to miss this. I think this is really important because step 2 and step 3 really depend on doing this. You want to figure out who this bottom of this big triangle is. Like, you want to go into your database. You want to run a report, you want to look at everything, and you want to figure this out. You may call these things different things, but every church has, 3 or 4 categories of givers. You can, assign dollar amounts to them or whatever. But what we want to do is help you figure out who's there, but they're I like what you said, they're either non-givers or they're nominal givers. So you got to pick a threshold and go, show me everybody that's around that hasn't crossed this threshold yet. And so we got a poll question. I like this. I can't vote again.
Yeah, they don't let us vote. We don't get to vote, buddy.
I'm locked out of the poll.
Yeah,
so does your church monitor, track, or segment givers? Maybe like this, or maybe with some different terms. Like, do you have a mechanism, and are you looking regularly? How many people, what percentage of people would be in these different categories? Yes, no, or we don't know how. So we can just let everybody vote, and I think we can see what everybody says. This is a big step for some churches because you're kind of looking at finance data in a new light. It's not just
that's right.
Show me the total offering amount. It's like, it's a step. This is a step, but it's important.
Very important. Very important. And I think I would say, just kind of filling in the gap here for a second while people are filling out the poll. Oh, look at that. Wow.
Okay.
I think we hit the mark here.
Yeah, this is good. So I would say everybody that said no or we don't know how, we can definitely help you with that. But I do think that this would be an exercise worth doing, right? And if the data is sensitive, I know this is a little bit of a sensitive subject. You could actually see the percentage of givers if you don't want to see names, if you don't want to see amounts. I mean, you can kind of anonymize this data just to be able to say, hey, we know that like 45% of the people who come to our church don't give anything. Even just knowing that number without the data and the list is a good first step for some churches.
Yeah. I love that idea. And I find a lot of churches that we talk to, they're open to that idea is, can you just show me the statistics without showing me the name?
Yeah. And that's fine. That's fine.
At some point, we need to get to the names, but that
Yeah.
might not be what everybody in this room needs to look at today.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a good starting point. So I think that's a good transition to the second point. I'd love for you to talk about this, because I think part of the reason behind knowing this is just like we talk to a child differently about the Bible than we talk to an adult. I think we want to figure out this segment, and we want to speak to these donors, these non-donors or nominal givers. We want to speak to them a little bit different. We're not going to treat them differently, but we're going to speak to them differently. And I think that's an important distinction. And so one of the best ways to do this is to not just say, hey, start tithing or start giving to the church, but to actually call out something specific. So I'd love for you to talk about that and how this could work.
Yeah, this is kind of this is under that category, Michael, of for those people who are not giving, we've got to find all the friction that might be in why they're not giving and try to take that friction out. And regrettably and unfortunately, for many of them, it's poor theology and or bad experiences. Poor theology and or bad experiences. And they'll say things like, well, the church doesn't need my money, or the church is always asking for money, or whatever those things are. And so the notion of giving to the church as their first move is not where they want to go. But the idea of giving beyond the walls of the church is a great idea. They might already be doing that, giving to good causes and good things out there. So what we want to do is give them kind of back to our dumbbell, the 5 or 10 pound dumbbell that we want to get them to start exercising this muscle is we would want you to give outside the walls of the church. So the church might present it somewhere. Let's just look in the COVID-19 season here, where I live in the Atlanta area. You live here as well, but right here in Johns Creek area. One of the things we noticed in our community right off the bat was our food pantries got overwhelmed. One of the food pantries right here, not too far from where I'm sitting, their demand went up 15 times just like that. Well, look, even if you had a food drive, you can't get enough food, and they don't have enough place to store it to serve 15 times demand. But gift cards would be the answer, right? And so what if the church talked about that during the weekend and talked about, hey, what we really need to do is we're really trying to help them out, gift cards, but then you activated a segmented donor plan to this group down in this category that we've identified, and you ask them overtly, maybe for a $25 gift card for a family. Hey, here's what we've got. We've got a partnership with, one of the grocery chains here locally. We can buy gift cards for like 85 cents on the dollar. So actually we can do it for a better price than you can. And we can also get restrictions put on those gift cards so they can't buy alcohol and cigarettes. We want them to buy the things they really need. And so, Jim and Nancy, what I'm asking you, would you give $25 to support one family for a week? So create and promote a cause. Be willing to ask overtly for that dollar amount. I mean, when we move over and get outside of this is just a starting point. At some point, we're going to, and we'll talk about this in the next point, we'll get them over into stewardship and teaching them what it means to be a disciple of Jesus and to get that connected to your money and give in a biblical way. But we want to just get the muscle exercise, get you used to the fact of giving to your church to support this cause, whether it be a food pantry or a homeless shelter or whatever it might be, because they love those kinds of things. And so the idea of creating and promoting a cause is really underneath kind of the big idea of take the friction out of giving, take all the, and I'm not, by the way, and you know this, Michael, but let me just say it for everybody on this listening here, all the poor excuses, because they're mostly poor excuses for why people don't give. Let's try to negate as many of those as we can and get them to just start exercising that muscle a little bit. That's really the point we're trying to make here.
Yeah, I think it's so good, right? Because sometimes, I mean, for a new giver or somebody who's not giving to the church, giving to the church feels ambiguous, right? They don't exactly know what's going to happen with that. It's like they don't really know the inner workings of the church, and so it just feels like they're just supporting something that's, we think it's good and it's doing a good job, but we don't actually know what it is. But when you say $25 gift card for this thing right here, it's very tangible, and tangibility through creating kind of this cause or promoting this cause is a great way to kind of get people to take that first step. I know when I talk about this, I always get this pushback. It's like, well, if they give to the food bank, they're not really giving to the church, so what's in it for us? Yeah. And they don't ever ask it that boldly. So I get the rude simplification of it. But here's what's important to remember, just on a very practical level. These are non and nominal givers anyway. I mean, like, they're not giving to your church yet anyway. And so this first step, we're not saying this is the only step you want them to take. We're saying this is a first step, and it's clear and they can understand it and you can point to it. And chances are there's something in every one of our communities, no matter where your church is, that you could lift up like that story you just told, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets them in the habit of making a gift to the church, even though it's going outside the walls of the church. And that's really all we're saying here is everything else we've tried hasn't to this point hasn't activated them.
Right.
Let's try something that might activate them in doing that. And, lots of other entities, nonprofits and political organizations use a similar methodology very, very successfully, very successfully. Some of the political campaigns, they're raising some of the largest shares of the money that they're raising out of these grassroots campaigns from people who give $25 and $50.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
we know that that works as a strategy. All we're saying is, let's take that and adapt that and bring it inside the church. And again, just give them that 5 or 10 pound dumbbell to start exercising that muscle, which gives us a place that we can jump from and maybe teach them something a little bit better.
Yeah, and so I think even this is a great transition into the third thing, because again, we don't want to leave people here. Now, I grew up in a Baptist church. What kind of church did you grow up in, Jim?
I grew up in a Methodist church. Yeah.
Okay.
My grandparents were Baptist, so I got exposed to that as well.
Okay. So I grew up in a Baptist church where all the sermon points were like alliterated and they rhymed
Yeah. Yeah.
properly. So it's
Yeah.
like, I can't help it. So literally while you were talking, I was thinking that we're not necessarily asking people to give to the church. We're asking them to give through the church.
Mm,
And the church is doing a lot of good work in the community anyway. And so, but just by highlighting those causes, the church kind of becomes a conduit, and it just sits differently with new givers until
yeah.
they understand, hey, our church normally does this. They feel like it's a little bit of a pass-through mechanism, but in this way, the church becomes a conduit to serve the community, and you're connecting people into really the mission of the church anyway. So, which is the third point, and I think really important. So after you kind of create and promote this cause, and most of us could probably point to several causes in our community worth supporting. You talk a lot about this, is using that as a stepping stone toward more church involvement. So there is a strategy here. We are trying to take them on this journey, and I do think this point's really important. So what does this look like?
So the whole idea is then to connect the cause back to the church, right? As a part of the mission and ministry of the church. So in the case I just gave, that particular food pantry would be an already known partner of the church. So it's not like you brought some new partner in here. You're already in partnership with them. You're just trying to help them in a season where their demand escalated beyond what they could do through the traditional method of giving people food in a bag. You can't collect and distribute that much food that quickly, but you can get gift cards. You can get gift cards. And then what you do is, once they give to that, say once or twice, then you begin to move them over into this pathway of helping them to understand, here's what our church is really up to. Here's our mission and vision, and here's why that piece is important. And then secondarily, you begin then introducing them to the discipleship of giving. What we would say, you and I would say to churches, to pastors, if you are about the Great Commission, and if you're a church of Jesus followers, you are of course about the Great Commission, then making disciples is a big priority for you. And if you're going to make disciples, you're not going to do that without teaching them about how their money and their faith get connected together. You can't do it.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, from those that are on the call today, I'd love to just ask this question, because we're talking about, I don't know if it's so much finding a cause or creating a cause, but maybe it's one that already exists. Maybe you already have a relationship with somebody. But I'd love to ask this question and then have everybody just kind of type their response in the chat bar. Are there local ministries or causes in your church that you're already connecting with, or maybe that you could connect with? So like what Jim is describing, he used the example of the food bank. And that's just one very specific example from one church here in Atlanta. But are there some ministries that you're connected with that you maybe could bring front and center, if not to the whole church, at least to this group? So lots of cool stuff coming in here. Church Under the Bridge, food bank. food pantry.
Yeah, love that.
Devin said, I like the food pantry and an orphanage in Haiti. So it's like this local and
Love it.
as
Love it.
international.
You got one here and out there.
Yeah, I like that. Feed Toronto, serving meals throughout downtown Toronto. Children's home. Heart. Hosanna Emergency Action Response Team. That's like from good old
Good
Baptist Church days
stuff.
right there. Come on.
Yes, sir, man. I love this.
Yeah, look
Good
at all these
stuff.
cool things that are happening, man. We've got some churches doing some really great things in the community.
Love this.
Jericho Road Refugee Ministries, San
Love
Antonio
that. Wow. Wow.
Prison Ministry, backpacks. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's so interesting. Habitat for Humanity. Yeah. Church gives away to multiple ministries, listing them out. Yeah. So I love this. It's so, it's a little bit counterintuitive, right? To go, well, what we have budget needs in our church. We have, we've got stuff that we're going on here. Are we really going to encourage our people to give over there?
Yeah.
But it is a great, great step. And here's what I love about this, again, just being very practical, is it just gives us so many more stories to tell.
Yeah.
We get to tell stories about people that are serving our community. These ministry stories become our church stories and vice versa. And to me, there's just something powerful when a local church like partners with local ministries that are not directly ministries of the church, teamwork, and it's so motivating toward new givers.
Michael, we talked about this a little bit yesterday in the rehearsal for today, but it's interesting to me how many churches are actually, from at least to this point with their giving, are seeing it flourish in this season. They have had April and May, some of them even March as well, that have been well above the same months in 2019. And they've asked me, Jim, why do you think that is? I don't know all the reasons, but I'll tell you one reason for sure. And that is that in this COVID-19 season, their ministries and the stories of what they're doing in ministry are on display like never before. And you've made this a part of your life and experience, and I have too. And that is when you spend as much time as you and I have around givers, man, that stuff is it's like giving candy to somebody who can't get enough sweets. That's what they want. Donors love to see stories of how when my church is on point in its mission and doing what it does best, how it wins in impacting people. And that's been on display like never before. And what we would say is, friends, don't lose that lesson in this season. That's part of your playbook going forward. You have to make that a part of it.
Totally, and it's tangible. I think I don't have any data on this, but I was thinking as your triangle was up, the people that were at the top, the broad part of that triangle, that are really supportive of the church in a big way. I mean, they're going to do that because they believe in the team and the mission and the purpose and kind of this deep seated stuff. But the people, the folks that are giving a lot have been giving consistency for years and years and years. They're giving to that mission and vision. New givers, sometimes the more tangible we can make something, the easier it is for them to understand, and the more likely they are to just kind of jump in and participate for the first time because they can see it, right? I can see the thing happening. The longer somebody is on the journey, they begin to understand all the nuance of how it works and long-term change and all those things. And there's a different threshold for that. But new people, if you just want to get somebody new, they got to understand it. They got to see it. They got to point to it, make it plain. And I think that's a key way to get people engaged for the very first time.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, let's kind of finish up with this one idea that you and I really wanted to emphasize, and let's go to some Q&A because I think Steve is telling us we've got some really nice Q&A out here.
Great.
And that is that this is not a short-term thing.
Yeah.
It could be if you wanted it to be, but what we're talking about is a complete change of systemic behavior for the long term in your church, where you would not just activate this one time, but you would continuously activate this kind of a strategy to get new people in and started giving. That you have to be, that the key in this is to be persistent and consistent over a period of time.
Yeah.
And just watch it work. Now, obviously, the partnerships and the ministries that you emphasize in a season, those are going to shift over time. But this is really something for you to keep doing on and on and on. And by the way, we didn't talk about this piece, but this is a very important piece. Acknowledge and celebrate new givers in your worship environments, right? So if you are activating this strategy and you had 41 people who gave for the first time last month, say that inside
Yeah.
of a worship gathering. I mean, don't read the names off, of course, but say, hey,
And the
friends, we
dollar
had
amount.
41 people, right? Because here's what you know is if you're one of the 41, you're sitting out there and you're like, wow, I just got celebrated.
It made a
And think
difference.
about that. In most churches, the churches inadvertently probably spend way too much time lamenting why these people don't give instead of celebrating when they do give,
That's the truth right there.
right? And
Truth.
and that's a big part of why people who are non-givers don't give. It's like, hey, look, I might not be giving, but I got lots of company. Pastor just said half the people here are not, so I'm in the half that doesn't. I've got lots
Right.
of company. Let's cut that out
Right.
and start talking about people who cross the threshold and go over to the side and grab that 5 or 10 pound dumbbell and say, I want to start the exercise. I want to start the exercise program. I want to become a disciple. I want to understand more. But my first step is I'm going to give a $25 gift card so
Yeah.
I can take care of one family for a week at that food bank or food
Well,
pantry or
it's
whatnot.
the gym praising the person that moved the 5 pound dumbbell, right? If you lift the 5 pound dumbbell and then came along and say, well, you could have done the 25 pound one. We got, all these other ones you didn't do. It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
so
That's
definitely
why you
create
don't introduce them to the trainer the first day in the
keep that
gym, because
trainer
that's the way
away.
the trainer treats you.
So these steps, and then I think we can do some Q&A, but I think these steps, and I love what you said about being persistent and consistent with this. And so what I would do, this would just be my advice, so kind of take it, process it. What I would do is I would put something like this on your calendar. Like think, when can we do this? Like, are we going to do this in September? You could wait and do this at Christmas. I know a lot of times churches do this at the end of the year. Because of COVID, the year calendar is all messed up. So it kind of doesn't really matter. You can kind of do it whenever. But I would put this on the calendar and say, hey, when can we devote some announcements and some emails and some communication capital toward creating a cause? When can we specifically email that segment of, you don't have to say, hey, I'm sending this to all the people who are cheap and have never given. You don't say it like that. But you do communicate to this segment and give them a cause and when can you put this on your calendar? And then I think once you get that done one time, then one of the ways you can make this consistent, you just put it on your calendar again, do it again a few months from now, and then make it a regular rhythm. I think that'd be a huge action step.
I love that, Michael. Y'all are so good about that at Church Fuel, about creating systems and getting it calendarized so it doesn't get overlooked and forgotten. And
I just know
that's a great point.
I just know I don't do stuff that's not on my calendar, which is why
You bet.
I've never done this webinar before.
Now we know the secret.
Now, if it's not on my calendar, I don't do it. So
exactly.
put this thing on your church calendar.
Good. Hey, Steve and Christy, y'all want to tee up some Q&A for us?
Yes, that's why I came on camera. I was like, let me wrap this up so we can jump into some Q&A.
Come on.
All right. So Cindy asked, is there a dollar amount that you would suggest as the dividing line between high capacity givers and leadership givers?
Yeah, not a pure dollar amount, Cindy. I would say that when you look at your giving statistics, when I look at a particular giving database and I see where the distribution of the numbers are, I can typically see a gap. There's a few people who have giving, and then there's a gap between them and the next group. Let me just use an example. If I saw, a number of people, let's just say I was looking at a database and it had 12 people who gave 50,000 or more, and maybe it had another 15 people who gave 25 to 50. But if I saw that right at that 40,000 level, there was a break and it went from 40 and the next person was like 26,000, I'd say there's your break point. If you were in a church that was larger and in a very affluent area, that break point might be 100,000 or more. And so it really does depend on local demographics. I'm not trying to evade the question. I'm giving you the real answer. I would look for the top 1 to 3% of your people who are giving, generally. It might be 5, but directionally 1 to 3%. And you'll usually see a break point. Then you'll see this large group of people who are faithful, consistent givers in the middle. And then you'll see another break point down to the group of people who are more like the congregational givers.
I think it's great. I would, and I think we didn't really talk about this too, but I think when you do create these kind of segments, I would actually tailor your messaging in those segments. Like when you have those higher capacity folks, I would make sure I send them personal notes and emails to a different degree with like more information than I would to, like, obviously we're talking about these new and nominal givers. You want to speak to them separately too. Just like curriculum, right? Tailor your messages toward the segment and it'll just work better.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We have an anonymous question. Are there thresholds or percentages you suggest to use when segmenting givers? Also, it's a two for one. Also, is there a software or technique you recommend using to search this data? They are currently using QuickBooks.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we talked about, thresholds and percentages, we just kind of unpacked that idea in the previous answer. It's different things to different people. Your numbers, if I was a pastor of a church and Michael was a pastor of a church, we might have different demographics. And so our numbers might be different in terms of the bottom for where's the cutoff for high capacity or other people, but we would both have similar percentages of people. So 1 to 3%, maybe a little bit more, is going to be what your high capacity group typically would be. You're probably going to find that your middle group is somewhere between 20 and 30%. And then if you just do the math, you're going to find that the rest of your group is going to be somewhere between 55 and 70%.
And I would just pick dollar amounts. I mean, you have to pick dollar amounts. You're not going to preach a sermon on this and make it like public, right? So I would just pick some dollar amounts that kind of represent what is true of your area and your people, and all churches are different, and then just go with it, and it'll be close enough.
Yeah.
Well, the second part was a software question, and we could easily get into the weeds on that. And so I think where I would tell most people to start is whatever they're using to track contribution statements, right? At some point in time, you're using something to send out a contribution. Hey, Bill, you gave this much. So QuickBooks is more of an accounting software, and then kind of the database management. I mean, all the giving companies have software. I mean, there's like a million softwares you could use. And so there may be, if you need a specific recommendation based on circumstances, you can reach out. But there's probably not one for everybody, but it's gotta be a software that ties the amount to the contact record, not just general accounting software where you pay bills and stuff, but the software that connects the person to the amount, where you're kind of matching those up.
Awesome. And the next question, I think, Jim, you would love, because I've heard you talk a lot about this.
Is it about mint?
It's not about mint, close, and not about grilling. Now that we are all pre-recording or live streaming services, do you have practical suggestions for how to offer ways to give as part of the service? Do you create an informational slide to run at the end or in the middle of the service? So I know giving moment is your heart. So Jim.
Yeah, so Christy knows that I'm really passionate about this thing. I have a story about a friend of mine who is early in the COVID-19 season, the weekend of the 15th. He texted me on Tuesday, and then we talked on the phone. His church runs about 45 to 48,000 a week in offering. So you can figure out they take about $2.5 million a year. And he took in $9,000 the weekend of the 15th. Called me in a panic, texted me in a panic, and he's like, 3 more Sundays like this and I'm broke, man. And so we went back and looked at his service from that Sunday. Again, remember, he's a friend. I can speak to him in a little bit more candid way than someone else. And I looked at it and looked at his giving moment, and I said, bro, I love you, man, but I wouldn't even give from that moment. It was just not good. And so I think what you have to do in this online environment, you have to take the giving moment seriously. You have to be focused on it. You have to make it intentional. What I would say is in the in-person giving moment, lots of churches set up the preaching, and then the giving, the passing of the offering occurs after the preaching. I would not do that online. And the reason is that the statistics are very clear. Once the pastor is finished on Sunday morning, you can look at yours. The drop-off rate online is severe. And so if that's where your giving moment is, you're missing lots of your people. It's kind of like, hey, I can't leave my church right after the pastor's finished. He would see me and I would embarrass myself, but online I can do it and you don't even know that I left, right? Click a button, Michael. I'm a MAC address to you, baby. You don't know. So but make the giving moment very real. Make sure that you address both electronic and non-electronic givers. I'm big on trying to get as many people as possible onto an electronic giving platform, particularly onto a recurring gift if you can. But I'm also realistic to know that some people are not going to do that. And in the environment where you're not meeting in person and passing the bucket, plate, basket, whatever it is that those people need to know, how do I give?
Yeah.
Those people tend to be, I think y'all have already figured this out, of my generation. I'm a boomer. They also tend to be fairly good givers in the life of your church. So if your giving moment is focused on trying to move everybody to electronic and ignoring how do you get a gift to the church in this season, you can mail it to the church, you can drop it off at the church. I mean, there have to be different ways that you can do that. So make sure your giving moment is robust and specific and intentional. And yes, definitely use slides to show all of that and put it before the preaching.
Good.
Awesome. The next question is from John. He says, I get the idea to help non-givers take a first step towards giving through the church. What practical interventions or engagements seem to navigate the tension of moving from giving through the church to giving to the church?
Go, Michael.
You give me the hard questions. So some of it is there's a philosophical approach. There's some philosophical things that work here. Once somebody's mind is open toward generosity, they tend to be more aware of generosity as well. So first of all, I would just celebrate the fact that they're giving through the church. And while I would be intentional about helping them give to the church, you got to know when to not rush that and when to just kind of leave it alone. And so any generosity kind of begats generosity. And so I think people will get there with some time and effort. But I think part of the key is actually, it's actually bringing the stories. So let's use the food bank example. You got to figure out how to make the successes of the food bank the successes of the church. Right? We need to not commandeer and like fake take their stories, but talk about how your church is supporting this. And if you're helping us, you're helping them. Like you can do that through stories. Stories work so much better than kind of facts and statistics at this stuff. That it's almost like we probably shouldn't use facts and statistics. Like that's how much better stories are. And so if the food bank is doing something amazing, find ways to tell that story in church, like in your church service, in your streams. And kind of not commandeer in a negative sense, but like show that you're working together with those things. That it's not a sideways thing, that it's actually part of the church. And as you guys were sharing all those things that you were supporting, I mean, it was so encouraging. It's like our church is doing this and all these amazing things. Like bring those into the ministry of the church, into the life of the church, into the communication of the church, not just have some random thing on the side that you can support if you have $25 extra this month. That's what I would do.
And that's why it's so important that they were already a partner of the church. We already see them as a part of us facilitating, accomplishing our mission and vision here. We want to reach marginalized people and oppressed and people who are unfortunate. Well, that's one of the closest places we can do that. We're already a partner with them. So when they win, we win. When we win, they win. The other piece too, Michael, and this is something I've seen as a pretty high correlation among non-givers. Non-givers tend not to be in a small group. And so if you're going to disciple them, I think we all would agree, I think most, if not all of us would agree here, the single best place to disciple somebody is in a small group, whatever your small group structure might be. And so that would be a part of my getting them off of just that over into. I think the pieces you talked about are excellent. Add in the small group piece, man, and that's the combination I'd be looking for right there.
Well, and that goes along with that journey, right? Because the journey of generosity is not only about generosity. I mean, we know that people that volunteer tend to give more. We need people that are in small groups tend to be more generous. Volunteering in small groups are connected. Like all of these discipleship related tasks, or not tasks, steps move forward together. So I think that's smart.
Yeah.
That was good. That was really good. I love stories. It's the way to capture your church's heart.
Yeah, just so tell stories.
So we have a couple more questions and we're running low on time. So do you track giving by families as giving units, or do you look at the individuals? Do you start accounting for individuals at a particular age?
So I would do it by family. And the reason is that even if the husband and the wife both have jobs and both, even if they give separately, I think your church's best view of of generosity with them is to look at it together. Is to look at it together. Um, I've seen churches that have done it separately, and I've seen how the statistics play out in that. And what it does is it introduces a level of confusion into the statistics that they're trying to keep. So I would look at them as a family. If it's the Shepherd family in Berkeley Lake, Georgia, then that's all of the adult members of the Shepherd family. Now, what I would do is, and pick an age. I was talking to the church yesterday. They transition at birthday age 21. They automatically transition all of the children into a separate family, into a separate, for right or for wrong. We're not debating philosophy here. That's just the way they do it. So if Jim and Nancy had a child who turned 21, that child automatically becomes its own giving unit separate from that. Even if they live at home and this is the way it came up, but they had the same address as their parents. Even if they live at home, they become a separate family. So that's how I would track that.
Yeah, that's probably right. And honestly, that's probably a database decision as well, not just even limited to just finances. So,
all right.
Hey, Christy, I want this next question. Can I have that one?
Go ahead. I'm not sure which one you see as the next one, but
Linda's question. Do you think there's a problem with people who only wanting to give cash in order to keep giving anonymous? Linda, I think you have hit on an issue, but I think there's another issue you've hit on. I think people give cash so they can remain anonymous, not so their giving remains anonymous. I think that people are checking out church. They don't want to be known. They want to be able to check out the church and kind of keep it. And the one thing they can't do that gives their identity away is to write a check or give a gift that identifies their name. And they want to remain anonymous. I'm an elder in a church, in my church. I do membership interviews with lots of people, so I have the interaction. I know they're playing the anonymous game, and so they're trying to become anonymous, which is why, let me just tie this to the idea of first-time giver. A first-time giver is such a big deal because not only have they made a first-time gift, they've crossed the threshold of anonymity, and they've said to you, it's okay for you as the church to know that I'm here. I think that actually might be a bigger deal than the fact that they made their first time gift, which is why I would celebrate that and express gratitude for it. So hope that's helpful.
All right. We'll hit one more question, and then Michael and Jim, if you guys can answer some of these in the chat, that would be awesome. So sorry, let me go ahead. I lost my place here. At what point might you consider the typical giver a regular giver as opposed to a non-giver or an episodic giver? And how might you move someone from one stage to greater maturity?
Wow. Michael, I've got some thoughts on that. I know you do too. Who wants to go first?
I mean, I think you're going to have to make some assumptions, right? So either it's a number of times, like, okay, this is somebody's given more than X number of times, and you're going to have to define regular that way, or over a certain amount. I was talking to a church a couple weeks ago, and they used an amount because they said, hey, it's not likely that somebody would give over this amount without having some type of plan or some strategy around it. And I think that's fine. Number of times is also, I think, fine, but you're going to have to pick what that number is.
Yeah. I think it's both of those things. But here's the thing. Some people who are episodic givers are episodic because of the way they make their money. So right. I have two friends. Let me name two. I have two friends, both of them very successful. Both of them make high six figures a year. One of them is a commissioned salesperson in a very high ticket industry. And the other one is a litigator. So when he settles a $10 million case and he gets his share, whatever that might be, that trickles down to him as the lead attorney on the case, and he tithes off of that, the church is going to see, episodic high giving from him, even if they don't hear from him for another 3, 4, 5 months. Same thing with my other friend who said, so you can't just put it into frequency.
Mhm.
I like your idea, Michael, that you have to put it into dollars. What I would do is I would establish some thresholds for people. And as soon as I saw Michael's family give $1,000, there'd be a special note go to them. I'm tracking your cumulative giving. When you hit, let's just say, if we knew that only 12% of the families in our church give $3,000 or more, I don't know if that statistic's right or not, but if we knew that was, when you get to $3,000, I'll send you another note.
Yep.
When you get to 5,000, so I would pick some thresholds and I would send a special thank you note to you because I know that means you're an exceptional giver. Regular means either frequency or amount. And I like your idea. Just pick something and live with it because that becomes your threshold.
Yeah, and picking those milestones and then celebrating those milestones is a huge way to do it. And it kind of goes back to that first point we talked about is you've got to pay attention and know what's going on. I mean, you've got to look at these categories. You've got to look at these segments. This needs to be somebody's job. Somebody needs to pay attention to this because this is a crucial part of the discipleship journey. And it's kind of like the more, you remember that? I think it was NBC or something. They used to have on The More You Know, and it was like a star going across the screen.
Yeah.
Service announcements.
Yeah, it's great.
Like the more you know, the better we can like celebrate and tailor our communication and do all the things that we need to do. It all kind of starts from knowing. And so if we can kind of know what's going on, and not in a creepy like I'm spying on you way, but just know what's going on, the better we can pastor. I think I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah, good stuff, brother. That's really good.
We have a couple more questions. Michael, Jim, if you guys have maybe another 10 minutes to hang out, we have some participants that are still hanging out. We can answer those and then we will head out. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. All right, we have another question. Sorry, participants, if you guys can hang out with us for a few more minutes, we're gonna go through these questions. This is such a great discussion. We don't wanna let it go. So another question is, we've had good success over the recent years to seeing a good percentage of new givers coming online as regular givers, but we have seen a total of 0 first-time givers via our online platform. We've done 2 cause focuses opportunities during the COVID-19 season, and we feel like we're missing something.
I'm confused by the question. Maybe so we've had good success seeing new givers come online as regular givers, but we haven't seen any first-time givers. I'm not sure what the difference is between a new giver and a first-time giver in that story.
I think what I'm hearing, and if you're still on the line and you can send a clarification over there, either in chat or in the Q&A, Christy, if you could just monitor that and see if there's a clarification. I think what I'm hearing is you've had people who are giving by check or some other are moving over onto the online. Okay. But what isn't happening is when you're having these cause-related focuses, you're not seeing any first-time givers show up. I think that's what I'm hearing there, right?
That makes sense.
So I think without more information, Michael, I think what I'd go back to and just kind of talk through the points Christy, do you have some clarification there?
Yes, we're simply not seeing online platform givers. So people giving online.
As first time for their first gift.
I think
for
so.
For their first gift. Okay. So here's what I would say. And again, I don't know that this is absolutely the answer, but what hits me right off the bat is I think we assume a lot of times that church people know how to connect A and B together. And what I know from working with church people for 28 years is more times than not, they don't know that. And I think you really have to be very instructive in the way you do this. Hey, if you're not giving here at this church, this would be a great place for you to give for the first time. And we're trying to make this as easy as possible. Give them the text instruction, give them the online instruction. Actually don't even offer them overtly the opportunity to give some way other than that. And so you are really just kind of instructively speaking a certain behavior into the script, not instructing them to do it, but prompting them, encouraging them to do that. Let this be your first gift and let it be over here. There is some friction, and that said, there is some friction for some people that just for security reasons don't want to give online. Frank, for me, I think that's a little bit unfounded. Checks are a lot more risky than online gifts are these days. Cash, of course, is safe, but checks are a little bit more risky.
Yeah, we could have a whole long conversation and probably do multiple webinars on the strategy of getting people to kind of give online. There is a lot of that. We've got some articles on that even at churchhill.com. You've probably got some stuff on your website too, Jim Generis. So there's a ton of information on that. And so you probably need to explain it more. It's like we think we tell people what they're doing. I mean, we told them once, and how come they didn't do it? Well, that doesn't work on any of us. I don't respond to things I only am told once.
Right.
So we have to be consistent. You said be persistent and be consistent. I think that principle is really true even for this.
Yeah, I like too. One of the things I like, Michael, is the idea of just having a demo of how to do an online gift and showing it on the screen in service so people know how easy it is.
Yes.
I mean, that we've made so much progress in the last 4 or 5 years because, there used to be that there was online, but it was clunky. Well, now there's 5 or 6 of them that they're so easy. You can be up and running in like 40 seconds, even if you're fat fingered like me. Right.
And you got to tell people, it's like when you're talking about, you talked about that moment, right? When you're explaining the offering, I mean, literally have this, hold up your phone and say, this is how I'd give. Like, you have to model the way. This is how I give. And even tell people, like, this is the best way you can give here. I mean, this is, you can give any way you want, but if I could be honest, I'd love for you to do this, right? You can be honest and real and just kind of talk normal through it and not make it weird.
Yeah.
I like this question that Milo or Milo asked.
Yes.
I saw that one too, Michael. You and I both gravitated toward that one, didn't we? Who's going first?
I'll read it out for you guys, and then I'll let you fight over who responds it. That was going to be the last question for today.
Good cop, bad cop on it. I'll just argue the opposite of what you said, Jim.
Okay.
Should there be a firewall between the givers and the lead pastor? Should he know what they give? Should someone else share the giving moment rather than him? Ding, ding.
Go, Michael.
So there's a lot in this question, right? So there's culture of church. There may be a theological issue there for some. Some people are going to point to James that talks about seating the rich people at the front. If I know what somebody gives, then I'm going to treat them differently. And so this is a lot of a loaded question. And so here's what I would say. It's okay if the pastor doesn't know. I do think somebody needs to know. I think somebody needs to be paying attention. Somebody needs to, we know people in our church who are good at greeting people. We know people in our church who are good working with kids. We know people in our church who are good at singing or can play guitar. And we typically try to match their gifts to these opportunities in the church. So if you look at generosity in that same way, can it get sideways? Absolutely. And I would say that by Milo, I hope I'm saying that right, asking that question, that is a good tension to have. Like, we should probably always feel that. And the fact that we're wrestling through that, I would kind of say that makes me feel okay that somebody's knowing that and paying attention to it. I think the minute we think all this data and it's like, it doesn't matter, the fact that this is being lifted up as a sensitive subject is probably a good thing. So I think somebody's probably needs to know, because we need to communicate. And so we need to communicate properly. I don't think we should value people differently. And I think it's very important. Communicating to a high capacity giver in one way is not valuing them more than another human being in the church. We're not ascribing value to contributions. That's not what this is about. But I think it's a stewardship issue of like, how do we best help these people follow Jesus? How do we say thanks? I know when I was pastoring, I used to get a report of everybody who gave for the very first time, and I would send a thank you note. And the report I got, it didn't have dollar amounts. It just had, it just said, Bob gave for the first time, and I would send Bob a note. Thanks so much for doing that. We had an executive pastor who actually looked at all the data and knew how much Bob was given. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And I just think the question is a good question, and it's probably worth the sensitivity.
Yeah. I love the way you address that, Michael, because that may be a whole webinar by itself. What does the pastor know and why? And, take both positions and argue both positions. Because I have clients where the pastor does know who gives. I mean, I don't know anybody who sits there and just, is infatuated with it. But if a question came up, they could go look and see what Jim's giving is, which tells you whether he's really bought into the mission and ministry of the church. I have others that they don't. The executive pastor or somebody else knows. Here's what I would say, and I would really say this with as a strong encouragement. If the pastor does not know who gives, there is no need and really no valid reason for the pastor to say that in a Sunday service around the giving moment. Hey, I don't know who gives what around here. There's no reason to say that whatsoever. And I could go down that road for a while. What it's really doing is it's empowering some people that are non-giver. I mean, it's just doing a lot of things that are not healthy for the life of the church. So it's okay if you don't know, but don't make a big deal out. You're not more spiritual than the guy who does know.
That's good.
Right? And so let's not present it that. And that's the way I see it presented a lot of times. You know, the truth of the matter is, Michael, you've pastored and you know this. You've had people come into your office and sit on the couch and tell you much deeper, darker things than how much they give to the church. And if you could be trusted with that information, then what else? I mean, there's really not much else you can't be trusted with. So whether you choose to or not choose to, I like your presentation. It's okay if that tension is there. It's a cultural issue. One is not right or wrong. And in terms of givers, if you do choose to look at the information, I would leave you with this thought. All givers are the same, not all gifts are the same. All givers are the same, but not all gifts are the same. Just in the Bible, if we take the widow and her 2 coins, and if we take the gift that King David made to the temple in 1 Chronicles 29, vastly different gifts. The Bible does not distinguish between the 2 of those as givers, but they did accomplish vastly different things there. So that's probably my closing thought.
I think that's good. The second part of her question was, you know, should somebody other than the pastor do that giving emphasis or giving moment? And I think that's actually good to mix up.
I do too. I do too.
All kinds of one of my favorite moments that I've seen churches do is when actually volunteers do it. To have a volunteer stand up and say, "I am not on staff here. I do not get a paycheck from this church, but my family and I, we give here, and here's why," and give a little testimony. Like, I think mixing that up with different people and just having some different messages is super healthy way to do that.
And the pastor's voice should be one of those voices every now and then, but rotate some of the other voices in there. Love that.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Good stuff, man.
All right, guys. Well, this is the end of our webinar. Thank you so much to the both of you for your insight, your wisdom, your stories, your tips on growing Mint. Thank you to all of the attendees. Your questions have been great. You've been a wonderful, wonderful audience, and we're really grateful for it. I feel like we could have so many roundtable discussion sessions around so much of this. For everyone who is still online, just to let you know, we will be sending out an email with the recording of this webinar. So if you missed it, you were late, you want to share it, it was awesome, and you just need to watch it again. This will be hitting your inbox in the next day or so. Included with this would be ways to connect with Generis Church Fuel and Michael as well as Jim. Generis is also going to offer you a new resource as a pre-release. We haven't released it yet. It's called Stabilize. It's really going to help your church in this season. And if you have any questions, any challenges, things you're struggling with, we've put together a lifeline support where it's really easy for you to get these questions that you have and connect with one of our team members at no cost to you, because in this season, it's a hard one. We have questions and we need a friend to get us through. So we'd love to be here with you. And Church Fuel will also be sharing some resources in this really fun bundle we'll be sending out. And again, thank you, everyone. This was so good. So many mic drop moments and things that will definitely preach. So thank you, everyone, for hanging with us.
Thank you. Hey, good to do this, Michael. We should do this again. Let's find another topic and do it again.
Good stuff. We'll just talk about anything and everything.
Yeah, like we did at the start, right?
We did at the start. Good stuff.
All the people who asked for the recording because they missed the start, they get the extra session on growing herbs.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about it at the end. If like anybody joined late, and it's like, if you didn't hear the talk about Mint, what in the world? What did I miss?
Thanks for showing up, guys. We love you.
Good stuff.
Let us know how we can help you.
See ya.